Hello, everybody. I am going to make a lecture on Chapter 3.2, which covers the art of the Middle Ages, as they are called. Um, we just finished with the Roman chapter, and then we are in between the Roman chapter and the Renaissance, which is why they're called the Middle Ages. And we're going to see stylistic variations of art and architecture. And a lot of the art that we're going to look at, most of it, will have to do with religious beliefs, in particular, the Catholic religion. So, Middle Ages are sometimes called medieval. Um, they used to be called the Dark Ages, and that is because art historians and architects, archaeologists, considered the art in between the Great Roman Empire and the Renaissance to be less than great. But I hope you'll see that relooking at it, this is not true at all. There are two distinct periods of this chapter. There's the Romanesque, which means Roman-like, and we'll see why. And then the Gothic period, which is right before the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance. And again, we're going to see the rise of the Catholic Church, and it is going to fund and create most of the art we're going to look at in this chapter. So the Roman Emperor Constantine, at the end of our last chapter, does the unthinkable, and he makes not just the Catholic religion, but all religions now legal. They used to be illegal, and they were considered cults. If you're a Muslim, or if you're Jewish, or if you believed in Christ, you were persecuted and possibly brought to this place, the Colosseum. You were made to fight lions or enslaved, terrible things. Okay, so this is the Colossus statue of Constantine. It is said that on his deathbed, he actually converted to Christianity himself. So we see a total shift from pantheistic, or what the Christians would call pagan religions, to a worship of one person, Christ, and one God. But all religions started to sort of come to light, or come up out of the underground, as we'll see. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have origins in the Middle East. They all believe in one God. They are monotheistic. I mean, different gods, but in their own religion, they are monotheistic rather than pantheistic like the Greeks, the Egyptians, and the Romans. All three religions believe Abraham is a prophet. He factors into the religions, and all three of them warn against worship of false idols. And this is important for art making, because we'll see the Catholic Church will go to such great lengths to make great art that there will be a very big backlash, because they get away from this idea that they shouldn't worship things instead of God himself. So during the Roman times, this is very, very early Christian. This is in the catacombs. The Catholic religion was illegal, so that the Catholics had to hide, and they literally dug up tunnels and tunnels in Rome and other cities. And they had worships, or services there, like masses. And they also had funerals and buried their dead here, because all these religions will have their own burial practices. And they also made art in these catacombs, which are underground tunnels. And you can actually go visit some of these too. They're still in existence. All right, so this is called the Good Shepherd medallion here in the center. And this is a close-up of it. And we see Christ, who is the son of the Christian, sorry about that. Son of God on earth. We see him here in he's a shepherd. He's holding his sheep, and the other sheep are following him, the flock. And he is in this pose that we have seen in the last chapters. The Greeks come up with the contrapposto, right? It's the shifting of the weight onto one leg. And he is in the pose of the ancient Apollo figure. Of course, he has clothes on. But it's interesting that the Christians still sort of base their visual art on a people that have persecuted them so badly. And this is Romanesque art. And Romanesque, Roman-like, we see the Roman arch here. And that's really what it refers to, not a lot of other things. But we can see Christ now is in this image, and he's sitting on these stones as if on a throne. He carries his cross, right? He bears the cross. That's his story. He is surrounded by his flock and his halo. Right? So this is all symbolic, right? The flock are the people who follow him, right? He is the good shepherd that will lead the flock to heaven. And he wears this purple drapery. Purple is the color of royalty. And so Christ is sort of taking on the attributes of the king on earth. And this is purposeful, symbolic visual design. All right, so we can see he is the king. He's sitting on his throne here with his purple robes. Right, this is a mosaic, which is small little stones. Right, so all these little pieces here are just individual little tiny stones, which takes a lot. You can see the shading on his face there. You know, it takes a lot of forethought to like figure that out, like all this brown stuff on these sheep. You have to put, you know, a light tan one, a dark tan one, a white one in just the right order to make it look three-dimensional. All right, so there it is. It's these small pieces called tesserae. He wears gold and purple, golden cross, and I'll go back. It says he's flat looking, although I think the artist tried his best with the drapery. Everything looks that his face does look a little flat. And so we see this, this is not the same church. This is a later figure of the Emperor Justinian. But we see that royal figures now aren't sort of showing themselves as like the most powerful people on earth, because during this time, if you were Catholic, you would not think you were the king on earth, that Christ was the king on earth. But we see that Justinian here in the center wears his purple robe. He carries the bread, which is a symbol of Christ. The shield has the rose sign, which is the Latin sign for Christ. The bishop, I'm sorry, this is the bishop. This man holds a illuminated manuscript, which is a Bible or the Gospels. Right, so this makes a good comparison to things like, say, King Khafra, or any king that we've seen showing himself so powerful, like the Lamassu, taking on the wings and the body of a lion. Okay, so Justinian here is sort of taking on the attributes of Christ, but trying to remain devout. All right, so we see this sort of like symbiosis of royalty and religion in a way. So that book that man was holding is called An Illuminated Manuscript, which are handmade books that are based on the Bible or the Gospels. And you probably can't imagine this, that there were no books, right? You would never see a book in your whole lifetime during up until this time. These are handmade. They would take years and years, made by monks or scribes or very special people. Most people were illiterate, and only the wealthy were educated. These books were made out of uh, like sheepskin or cowskin hides, and they had gold and precious jewels. You can go back and see this guy here. See, these are all jewels like on the cover of it. All right, and so this takes a lot of doing to get one of these, and a lot of money and time. All right, so in your lifetime, if you were just an everyday person working like a serf on the land during this time, you might have heard of a book, but you wouldn't know really what it was. You wouldn't know how to read, and you would never ever see that book. Um, Sometimes students always say that sounds like a great life. All right, so inside these books are very elaborate designs. Of course, they're in Latin. And this page looks a lot like stained glass, which is not a coincidence. The churches have a lot of stained glass in them, as we'll see. So they're very precious objects. All right, and there's that word. Scribe is the person who gets to do the writing part of it. So over 5 years for one book to make. We have reliquaries in the Romanesque period, and this is the one I used in my little comparison video. It's the reliquary head of St. Alexander from 1145. It's made of precious stones. And this was thought to hold a skull, right? These reliquaries hold the relics of saints, supposedly. Some have fingers, some have bones, some have like fragments of their robes or something like that. So these reliquaries would be housed in churches that people would go pay money to see. So it's sort of a money-making event. During pilgrimages is when they would go see these things. So a pilgrimage to Jerusalem was the thing to do for many religions, because Jerusalem's thought to be the home place of all the religions, Muslim, Jewish, and Christianity. Right, so devout people, if they have the money, can make the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And if they're lucky, they can get to the Dome of Rocks, and you can see Romanesque, right? We have this beautiful, elaborate blue azure color on the outside, but we do have a pointed dome here, thanks to Roman construction, which travels all around Europe. People know how to make arches and domes. Um, so these paths would start in France, and people would travel around from church to church. You get a map, and you know which churches have different relics or reliquaries that hold the relics to go visit. So you could take all your money and hit the road, and you would, along the way, stop at these large churches um, and see their relics and spend money in their town. So um, this is one of the reasons why there is a giant surge in building projects in the Catholic religion, because there is lots of money to be made from these pilgrims coming from town to town. And if you have a better church, they'll go to your church or cathedral rather than another one. A very popular church to visit was the Church of Saint Foy in France. And you can see here these rounded buildings, very Romanesque. Right? The Relic of Saint Foy is not in your chapter for some reason, but the miracle is that Saint Foy appears to the priest of the Church of uh, in Conques and says that the relic belongs to this church, and so they promptly go and steal the relic and house it in their church so that people can come and see this and spend money. All right, so it's rounded arches, vaults, and columns, just taken straight out of Roman architecture, and the shape of a Latin cross east to west. So let me show you that. Here we go. So this is a plan, like looking down on it. So you can see it's in the shape of a cross, so symbolic use of architecture. The front entrance of every church or cathedral is on the west side. So when you travel in, you go from west to east. So you're always heading towards Jerusalem, and you're following this path of the sun. And these are also made so that if you have a lot of pilgrims coming in, there's 3 doorways, and there's all these different aisles for traffic flow. And in these radiating chapels, would probably be owned by wealthy families, and they may have their own little things to visit, their own relics that you could pay to see. So it's, you come to the town and you walk around and spend money, but then you can spend money right coming around the church like this. Oh, I should have said that too. So when you come in the west and you're heading east um, towards the Holy Land, you're also going towards the altar, and there would be a crucifix there. So you're always heading in the right direction. The west portal of a church would look like this. All right, so we have, this is just one door. There's two other portals as well. We got two big doors to come into, and then all the sculptural programs would be, like all these would be figures or different things happening, and a lot of the tympanums, this round thing above the door, you see it's all arches, would have either, in the Romanesque period, a lot of them were the Last Judgment, right? So that you would be reminded when you're coming in the door of the reason why you're going to church, and that is to save your soul and get to heaven. The sculptural program also helps with teaching or educating the masses because, as I said, most people were illiterate, so they needed the visuals, the pictures to teach and educate on the Gospels and the life of Christ. And that's why. And then this is the tympanum. So here we have the Last Judgment here, Christ enthroned. And as these always work, the people on Christ's right, it's his left to us, but it's his right, you can see that there are angels and horns being blown over here, and these people are all crowded in, and you can't see it that clearly, but on this side are the people who are going to go to heaven. You can see here, they're not in bad shape, but over here, you see this guy's being hung, and this looks like a monster. Right, so this is how you would educate people. They would know that this is Christ, and if you lead a good life, you'll be on this side of it. You lead a bad life, you'll be on this side of it. This is in your building chapter, the architecture chapter that you read, the interior of Saint Madeleine. And if you saw this on a test, hopefully you could identify it as Romanesque because it is in a church. So it wouldn't be Roman, right? Romans don't have churches like this, all right? Roman Catholics will in the next chapters. But so this is Romanesque because of the arches, all right? But so we have this heavy masonry. We're going to see this change very soon. And the use of the arch and these vaulted ceilings. So this is like a long arch all connected. And then some light being let in along the sides here, but really you can see the symbolic use of architecture where you come in and you go towards the light, right? So that's symbolic. You're going towards Christ where the altar is, where his crucifix is, and you're also going towards the Holy Land. We're going to get into the next part of the chapter, which is Gothic. And there's one man, Abbot Suger, who is responsible for creating Gothic architecture. He looked at something like St. Madeleine that we just looked at, and he said that is too dark. We need to open it up and use light in a more symbolic way. We need to find a way to make the church glow. He felt like you should be walking into bathed by the light of God. Right, so he comes up with a way, well, he and his architect, he has the idea to do it. He has to work with a bunch of people to get it done. All right, so it's a very similar plan, you can see. Still the radiating chapters, the arms of the transepts, nave, the crossing, all the aisles. People still have to get around these churches. But what they change is they elevate the middle part here and allow more light in the windows. But the real invention is these things here, the flying buttresses, which are like arms that sort of go from this part to this part and hold it up. right? So they're like pushing in so that the height can get greater and greater and greater. And this is the end result. So it works, all right? And then, so people would have, been bathed in this light, but you can imagine like just the sheer height of these buildings, people would have been overwhelmed. They would have thought like they were being infused with some kind of light of God. It would have been like the most massive thing that they would have ever seen in their lives. So we have the increased height, stained glass windows, rib vaults, and flying buttresses. These are like the key elements you need to have that Suger comes up with in his cathedrals. And in your building chapter or your architecture chapter 2.5 or 2.2, this Chartres Cathedral, there's a video on Chartres Cathedral. Very famous. You can see these flying buttresses for real here, right? So they're holding them up, these arms. You have all the stained glass windows, the roses, and what Chartres, you'll know this one because it has two different spires. These are the towers, and these are the spires that go, soar up to the heavens of God. The original church was burned down. It had burned down. It wasn't burned down. And all that remained was the west portal. So right here, again, west is always the place that you will enter in a church. So that was left. But these cathedrals would take hundreds of years and so much money. Sometimes towns would run out of money and not build on it for like 50 to 100 years because they didn't have the money for it. Taxes were incredible in these towns, and they had to really rely on the pilgrims to fund these. All right, so this is why these have two different spires. It had matching ones, but then when it burned down, they they built one, and then the other one was so much later that a new style, this one, was in, and they just went with it. Like, let's get the new style to attract more people, right? And they have these beautiful stained glass windows and this giant rose window, and this is what it looks like inside. So again, you have all the same things that we talked about. And the video does a good job talking about this labyrinth. If you were from France and this is the only church you could get to, you couldn't get all the way to Jerusalem, you could get on your knees and go around this. I forget how much they said, it was 900 feet or something that you could pray on your knees, and that would be similar to a pilgrimage. So we're going to, not the next chapter I'm going to cover because we have all the other chapters in between. When we get to the Renaissance, we'll see another shift happen. And that is because of one man. We're going to start talking about two-dimensional art rather than just architecture, because the Italian Renaissance is really a period of painting and sculpture. Whereas most of the earlier chapters in the book of history is about architecture. So what are artists going to do how does art look now and how will it look in the Renaissance? So Cimabue, a couple of you wrote about Cimabue in your comparisons. This is what a middle-aged painting or a Gothic painter would do, right? So we have these figures. We have the Madonna, which is Mary and baby Jesus. That's what we call Madonna, which means my lady. And then we have these figures here all stacked up, right? As if they're not in real space. They're just kind of floating near each other, even though they're angels. They're compressed. And then we have these figures down here, which would have been, so we have the priest here, and we probably have the man who paid for this painting. All right, but you can see that Mary is much bigger. It's hierarchical scale. All right, so it's not an illusion of real space. There's no a desire to have real space. It's telling the story of Madonna and Child. But this man, Giotto, decided that he thought two-dimensional art should look three-dimensional, this illusion. And you've already covered that when you talked about space in the first section, and then you looked at the painting chapter already. So you understand all these illusions that he's making. He tries a little bit of linear perspective here. All right, still a hierarchical scale because it is a devout painting, and then Christ and Mary should also always be the center of attention in this. All right, but you can see the angels really do look three-dimensional. Now they have enough space, they're overlapping. It looks a lot more natural. All right, so people are going to see what Giotto's doing, and they're going to go nuts, and everything's going to change in the Renaissance for painting. And when we get there, we'll talk about that. Thank you.